So this, of course, was rescheduled because of the drama with the car. And I think it worked out. Well, it certainly worked out for me because that day I was kind of a mess. But like, I think it's kind of nice that we were having this event on the Lunar New Year, where we're sort of starting a whole new year. Like, the lunar calendar starts over today. Just for your information, I am Year of the Snake. So this is my year. I'm a fire snake and it's wood snake's year, but really I'm just claiming it for myself, which is a very fire snake thing for me to do. Um, so, we're starting a new year. We can turn over a new leaf. Like the truth is, we think so much about like what do I want to be and who do I want to be at the turn of the calendar year that we follow for January 1st, right? But we can do it lots of different times. Every quarter is an opportunity to stop and say, like, is everything going the way I want it to? Every week, even honestly, every day is an opportunity to like say, I'm going to try something differently and see if I get a different result, which is a very smart thing to do because we live in a we're dynamic people and we live in a really dynamic world where things are changing all the time. So it's quite savvy to check in with yourself regularly and ask, like, is what I'm doing working? And, we don't want to be reactive, ending things just because we had a bad day, but we also want to be responsive. If something isn't working, there are different things that we can do. So, one of the things that happens that qualifies as things aren't working is a phenomenon that I have thought a lot about because I used to experience it a lot. And that's this phenomenon of goalnesia. So there is a little handout. Julie, did you put the handout in the chat? I think I just saw it come through.
I did.
Okay, thank you. So that handout is just, it's just one page. Mine is written on. It has a cover and it has like a QR code page on the back, but it's that middle page and it gives you 6 questions to ask yourself to like nail down why you're experiencing goalnesia. So you might want to just open that. You don't necessarily have to print it, but having it in front of you so you can, type in there as notes or something if you want to it might be a good idea. But goalnesia is kind of like amnesia. Clearly, that's like the merging of two terms. And it feels kind of like amnesia because it's so it feels to us so unpredictable. It's like I set a goal and then I don't do anything about it. And it can be lots of different kinds of goals or tasks sometimes even. Like it might be like quite a big goal for your business. It might be like, I'm going to start a group program, or I'm going to run this beta, or I'm going to create this course, or I'm going to write this book. And you're pretty serious about doing it when you make the goal, but then nothing happens. And you are as confused as everybody else is when they're like, hey, how's it going with your course? Or how's your website redesign going? Or have you started your group yet? Is there anyone I can send over to it? And you're like a deer caught in the headlights, like totally like evasive maneuver is something from this cartoon that we watch called Gravity Falls, where like the kid is asked a question and he says evasive maneuver, and he jumps out the window because he doesn't want to answer the question. Like that's how I feel when I'm experiencing goalnesia. Someone's like, what? So sometimes it's for your business. Sometimes it's just for your own life. You're like, I'm gonna run a 5K, or I'm gonna eat more vegetables, or whatever. And someone's like, hey, how's your running? And you're like, what?
What running?
What running? When did I ever say I was going to run? And then they totally are like, well, that 1 hour long conversation where you sounded completely convinced that that was the thing you were going to do. And sometimes this was the peskiest one for me because I couldn't even understand what my problem was with it. Like, I can understand why maybe I don't want to run. Maybe I don't like it. And I can understand why maybe I don't want to create a whole course. Like, maybe it feels like too much. But like, sometimes it's like, let's just pretend that you want to do something and somebody offers to talk to you about it. And on your to-do list, it says follow up with Matt. And then still says follow up with Matt the next week. And weeks go by. Like, what's our problem? And then your friend who went on a limb and connected you to Matt in the first place is like, hey, did you talk to Matt?
Oh my
And you're
God.
like, what? What is the matter with me that I have not followed up with Matt? So, first of all, that's the wrong language. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing the matter with you. But we do want to ask that question, which is, what is actually happening here? Why am I not getting into the flow of pursuing my goal or the task? Like, what's stopping me? And what I found is if something is trapped in like a web of Goalnesia, where like you set the goal and then you don't do anything, or you totally forget about it, that's usually like one of two simple, straightforward issues. It sits at the intersection of productivity and mindset. And honestly, there's usually a mindset component that's creating the productivity problem. And but it is true that once you solve the mindset side of it, you didn't then have to implement a productivity solution. So like both matter. We have to come at it from like we have to have a system that makes sure we can remember what it is we've said we're going to do. But honestly, it's a much bigger pool of people who actually the root problem is that there is something unexamined in that goal that they haven't really thought about. Or like they've thought about it, but they're denying it, or they don't think they are allowed to have that opinion, or there's something about it that just bugs them, but they can't quite put their finger on it. And your brain is a quite a powerful organ, as I'm sure you're aware, because it's responsible for everything you do. But one of the things that it does on its own, it's the subconscious mind stepping in, is if you have set a goal that your mind, who that knows everything, right, knows you actually have a competing commitment that stands in contrast with it, that's like butting up against it, then your mind is like, we don't have time for that nonsense. I don't have time for you to be arguing with yourself about this. So that's where you end up with this amnesia problem, where you're like, your brain is like, forget about it, just boop, and you do. So we need to resolve those competing commitments. And in order to resolve them, we have to kind of know what they're likely to be. So on this handout that you have, I have like 6 questions that you can ask yourself um, if you're discovering that like something's awry here, something has gone sideways on me. But first, you have to name it. And so, like, you don't have like if you think that your problem is procrastination, you got to get clearer than that, you know? So it's like, what exactly are you procrastinating on? What are you struggling to get started on? What are you running into roadblocks and quitting? You know, like the early quitting problem. What exactly? So cut down to the level of something that you kind of recognize it as like a project. You know, it's like I'm going to start running. It's not like I need to be healthier. It's like I said I wanted to start running, or I said I was gonna I was gonna go vegetarian or something if it's personal. It's not like I suck at marketing my business. It's like I never ever ever post on social. Why? I I'm really not making any progress on this course or group, right? Like that's at a level that you can kind of work with. And if it's a task, it's already kind of at a small level. It's like, why am I not following up with that person? Why am I not joining that course? Like, what's happening? What's my problem here? So if you can bring one to mind, if anybody would like to say it out loud, we're a small enough group that that's totally, we've got the time for it. Does anybody want to say it out loud? What they're experiencing Goalnesia in, if something came to mind?
Wait, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm trying to discern Goalnesia. I forgot that I was going to do this. What's the difference between, so I forgot that procrastination and Goalnesia, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, they're very tied up in each other for sure. I think Goalnesia is probably would be considered under an umbrella of procrastination, but sometimes you remember your goal and it haunts you. All you ever do is think about it.
Mhm.
but you don't do anything about it. That's like straight up procrastination. And Goalnesia is like this, it's a little bit of a gimmick, right? It's like, but it is that phenomenon where you forget, like you it's no longer on your radar. But all the strategies and questions would work for procrastination too. So if you have something in mind, I want you to kind of name it and maybe write it on the paper if you wrote it out, or just even just write it on like a post-it or something so that you can be thinking as we work through these 6 questions. And I will give you examples. And we're a pretty small group. So if you have a question or you just want to like use Jill, like ask a clarifying question or say something out loud, like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. But that is, like
So,
feel free to say that out loud.
so like I was supposed to write someone a check to
Yeah.
reimburse them for something, and I couldn't find the text that with the receipts on it. And I've known for a couple months, and they haven't asked me.
Hmm.
So that's procrastinating, whereas starting a grief group is
Hmm.
goalnesia.
I
It's
do think
like,
starting a grief group is Goalnesia. I
right,
think that writing that check could be a couple of different things. One might be you might set the task, write the check. And this is related to the idea of are you looking at the whole instead of a doable part? This third question. You might have to be like, my task today is actually to find that text message. Because if you keep setting the task to write the check and you keep not knowing where the text messages are, you keep overwhelming your mind with the
that's what happened.
problem. I want to write the check, but I don't know where the receipts are. I
Yes,
write the check, but I don't know where the receipts are. That TikTok thing is actually the real problem. It's competing commitments. I want to run, but I hate to sweat. I want to run, but I hate to sweat. I want to run, but I hate to sweat. Goalnesia. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But like, I think there's a lot more meat in the idea of starting a grief group, you know? So something like that might be helpful. So if you do have something, write it down. Please think of something and write it down. Even if you don't want to say it out loud, that's fine. Although, trust me, I would never judge you. I've had a lot of Goalnesia in my day. Not so much anymore, though. Um, so now, do you want to ask yourself some questions? Because the thing about competing commitments is they they feel confusing. We don't because they're unconscious most of the time. We don't say out loud like I don't like to sweat very often. But like if you don't like to sweat, then going for a run will always have that competing commitment in the center of it. And we feel at the mercy of our competing commitments. Like, well, it just is what it is. I don't like to sweat, so I can't run, you know? Whereas we're very much in control of ourselves, right? Like, and I'll stop using the running one and use the starting a group or course one. But I just know that every single person I've ever met has experienced Goalnesia around exercise. Like every person, except for maybe Susan, who seems to love exercise for real. But most people are like, I'm gonna go to the gym 3 times this week, and they don't. That's a pretty common phenomenon. Um, so one of the first questions that you have to ask yourself. So keep in mind that we're doing this all in the context of making space for our great work, right? Like we're here in this room because there is something we are called to do, like some difference we want to make in the world, some impact we want to have. And a big part of having an impact is clearing the decks of what you're doing out of obligation or compliance or because you should or because someone said you have to. And so the very first thing that I always want to start with when someone's like, "Well, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't get around to this thing." Almost always takes them aback too. It's like takes them by surprise. I'm like, "Do you want to?" And they're like, "Well, huh." A lot of people I have found, for example, they set goals for like, again, a personal one, like I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. And I'm like, "Why do you need to lose weight?" And it's like the whole world tells me I need to lose weight. And so that one of the most powerful time management, productivity, great work strategies that a person can employ is questioning that foundational question. Do you want to do this? Or do you just think you should want to do it? Somebody, and it's not always about like, things that maybe as women we aren't, oh, Haley's here again. As women, we aren't like maybe we're mad about that anyways, most of us, right? Like, stop even looking at my body, you jerk. But often there are things that people with the absolute best of intentions are recommending that we do with forceful language. They say things like, you have to write a book. You have to. If you don't write a book, you're not going to be able to be an expert and you're not going to be able to be taken seriously. It's the golden ticket. But in your heart of hearts, you don't want to write a book. Then you shouldn't write a book. You should say, like, I'll find another way to be taken seriously as an expert. There's more than one way to do it. And if something just feels wrong from the get-go, but you're telling people, oh, yeah, I'm going to write a book this year because someone told you you have to, that's a recipe, if not for Goalnesia at the outset, procrastination when you say you're genuinely going to get started, but also demoralization halfway through the project and some kind of like abandonment of the project when it gets really hard. Because the kinds of stuff that we're doing, when it's great work and it's new, if you don't know why you're doing it, you don't really want it, you're only doing it because somebody told you to, you're just not going to survive the dip, the hard part, the pit of despair, where you're like, what was I thinking? And why do that to yourself? You know you. So if there's something that you feel like you have to do, but you're not making any progress on it, the first question I want you to just genuinely ask yourself is like, do you really need to do this? And if not, the question might be, do I need to do this? Do I need to do this now? You know, if you don't need to do it at all, just put it out of your mind, move on from it. Maybe I'll be back someday. That's okay. You know, but there's also just the realization you can't do everything right now anyways. So maybe it's not that you never want to write a book. You just don't want to write a book right now. Or it's not the right time to to launch a course. Or you
But
just don't want to do one-on-one coaching or whatever it is. You know, like you and I think all those things are great. You should write a book and do one-on-one coaching and have a course and run a group and anything you want to do, I'm all for. It's not right or wrong. It's about what your time is extremely limited. So what are you going to put your, best energies towards first? And then if something is experiencing Goalnesia, it might be because it's not the right time for it or it's not right for you. So just let it go. There's a lot of power in that. So that would be the first question I would ask yourself. And you might find that you whittle your commitments down dramatically by asking like, do I really need to do this? Which is really what you should do. So then once you decide like, no, I really do want to do this, you then have to ask yourself the question, which is sort of, we already sort of touched on, is like, do I need to do this right now? There's the question of, am I worried that this is too much for me? There's two reasons something can feel like it can be too much. One is that it is too much. You're doing too much. You have too many commitments. Like you're trying to spin plates endlessly. And so we already sort of touched on that in the first one. I would say do as much as possible to get as many commitments off your plate as possible because your great work is an energy hound. You want to give it the best energy you have. And if you're dispersing your energy out in like 15 different directions, no one of these channels is strong enough to make a real impact. Whereas if you're just going in two directions, your energy is, or three directions, what I recommend, the three goals strategy built into the Great Work Method, one stretch goal, one support goal, one sanity goal. Then we're really focused on three things that we can actually impact. So one of the reasons you might be worried doing this is like it's too much, is that it is. You can't do everything you're doing and add your great work to it. There is a certain amount of, and if you're interested in reading more about it, you can check out chapter 3 of the book, which is called Do Less, Much, Much Less, and like work through those strategies. And there's another reason you might think it's too much, and this is where the mindset piece comes in. It might not be too much for you, but you're experiencing what might be called like post-burnout trauma responses. Like if you had a big, awful, exhausting, miserable burnout experience, and then you're looking at your life and considering kind of ramping back up and taking on a big project, you might just be like, I can't live like that again. I can't have that experience again. I just can't do it. In which case, we want to ask your mind, you must ask your mind and believe what you hear. Like, what is it about this that makes it feel like it might be too much? Like, is it that you are worried that you're going to have to, like, if I'm going to ever finish this book, I'm going to have to write every night and every weekend? And you're just like, I can't live like that. Then you need to do it, bye, Susan. You need to do it in a way where you have an agreement that you won't do it like that because you're the boss. So you say, I'm going to write this book, but I will not write it on the weekends. I'm going to protect my weekends the way I would protect my kids' doctor's appointments. I'm going to protect it the way I would protect my kids' mental health. I'm going to protect my own mental health that way. And then you make an agreement that resolves the competing commitment. I want to write this book, but I don't want to burn out again. Well, then write the book with a deep, hardcore commitment to resilience and creating like white space, downtime, and making sure that you don't do it that way because you're the boss. You get to decide. You don't have to do it that way. It's not required. People kind of believe that because of the way the world is and corporate America, and we're Americans and we work all the time, has to be that way. But you do have a lot of choice. And you don't have to. The subtitle of the book is Do What Matters Most Without Sacrificing Everything Else. Because your great work is not worth you having a mental health breakdown. You will not, on my watch, you're not going down again into burnout. You're going to find a way to do it. And I know that you can, but you have to make these agreements. You have to bring it to the surface, out of the subconscious, into the conscious mind, and then make an agreement that resolves the competing commitment. I'm going to write this book, but I'm not going to do it in a way that makes me feel crazed or unhappy. So that's a question that can actually really kind of calm your nervous system and make you think, okay, I'm the boss of this, and I'm not going to do it that way. I'm not going to screw me like that. And then that calms things down enough that you can start taking steps. So that's the second question. The third question that you might ask yourself is, do I know how to start? So sometimes when we set a goal, we set the end goal and then we try to work from that. I'm going to start a grief group. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to launch a course. I'm going to design my website. And you do have to name those things, right? Like we don't need to hide it. But then the question becomes like when you're actually choosing how to act on it, it needs to be translated out of the bigger, like it might be that writing a book is a vision. Like it's the highest level of goal setting. And you need to make it into the 90-day goal, right? Like I'm going to write an outline in 2 chapters. Oh, okay. Now that also helps with it's too much. It's too much. No, it's not. You're going to write 2 chapters in an outline. You're going to have to really do it, but like I'm going to do that. And then what am I going to do this week and what am I going to do today is a question of being real with yourself about where things stand and what kind of time you have. Trying to pretending that you have more time than you do is a recipe for feeling behind all the time. So instead, ask yourself, what what can I do this week? If I'm writing a book, my first step is writing an outline. It might be the only thing that you can do this week is figure out what book outlines look like. And it's aligned. So you're doing it. You get to check the box. I worked on my great work this week. But it's not like work on the outline, which feels like, but I don't even know what it is. I haven't even seen one. We're overwhelmed, right? We're stuck in that competing commitment. I want to work on my outline, but I'm not even sure what it is. Rather than going around in that circle, just change your task. I'm not going to work on my outline. I'm going to ask ChatGPT for 4 different book outlines that then learn about them. Or ask my friends who have written books, can you send me your outline? That's enough for this week. You're getting there. It's happening. We can all celebrate. You can join us in the Great Work community and we'll send you some confetti cannons. It's going to happen. And then the same thing can happen for today. You might have the task, figure out outlines, and then you only have 10 minutes today. So then what can you do? Well, you can go ask one for one outline and just print it out and look at it. You can send an email. One of my favorite, like, if I feel so productive, when I send somebody an email asking for something, and I know that's all I can do with it today. I feel like I have like they will now do something and then my next task will be lined up to like look at it, think about it, open it, send them back questions. So if I've only got 10 minutes, I might send a quick message to the designer of the cover and say like, "Hey, I really loved the designs you sent me, but I'm wondering if I can have this a little more prominent." And then that was all I could do that day, but like I did it. It was real. But if I'm thinking like of a much, much, much bigger task, then I'm confused and then I experience goalnesia. It's just not going to happen. And then we start saying things to each other like, oh, if I had a 4 hour block, then I could make progress on my great work. But that's always when I hear that, I'm like, that's somebody who needs to get a little more familiar with their great work. There are smaller tasks, there are little bits of progress. The real masters of great work understand that we do a little bit every day. And if we get a 4 hour block, we might use like a whole hour of that for a nap because we've been at it. We might do a big task and get it done quick and send off the email and think like, I have a minute. Now I'm going to take a nap because great work flows from resilience, not hustle. But if you're like saving it up and then you just have this 4 hour block, and it's the only time all week you ever give yourself to like dig into your great work, you can feel overwhelmed and tired and unhappy while you're doing it. And that's not, you have to know yourself and what works for you. And if that works for you, then do it. But also just develop the self expertise. Watch closely as you're going about doing these things so that you can make agreements with yourself that help you move forward. So that's the third question. I'm going to stop and just see if anyone has any questions. Julie, did I miss anything in the chat or does anybody want to say something like out loud, have questions or want to say anything?
You're all caught up from the chat.
Okay, good.
So I think we can go to the room.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything they want to just check in on before we move into the next, like half of it? Yeah, we're following. It's happening and it's all good. Sorry about that. I don't know why my do not disturb didn't work there. Cool. All right. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If they're really important, Julie will just interrupt me. But if they're just thoughts you're having, we'll have time, at the end to think about it a little bit more too. Okay, so I'll just keep going. All righty. So often what we need to do is make it a smaller task. And one of the tips that I would give you is actually, if you're feeling like overwhelmed by the bigness, it helps a lot to set up a checkpoint, which is where you say to someone like Julie, I'm often setting checkpoints with Julie. I text her and I'm like, if I don't have this draft done by Tuesday, you need to be mad at me. And like, Julie's not really going to be mad at me. Actually, she's never been mad at me, as far as I know. I could be wrong about that, but
You could.
I could be. But I just need it. I just need to be able for her to say, hey, Amanda, if I know someone's going to check in with me, then I don't have the option of goalnesia. And I forced myself to set a checkpoint, which is not an end point, it's a checkpoint. It's like, I know that I need to write this copy for this website. There's 5 sections, so I just got to get one of them done. And when you're talking about it like that, people can be more helpful too. People can give like good advice. If they're trying to give it at the advice of the whole project, who knows what they'll come up with. But if you say something really straightforward, like I sit down to write this and like I have nothing to say, then someone can say like, go ask ChatGPT. And then you're like, ChatGPT, I hate AI. But then you go try it and you're like, wow, you just wrote the whole thing and I'm done. It's like my experience with ChatGPT. but also the advice that you get is just better because they understand what you're actually struggling with. If you just tell someone I'm struggling to build my website, they could say anything. Maybe you need a designer. Maybe you should brand. You should go through a branding thing. Maybe you just need to use the Pomodoro method. But if you're clear about like where you're really struggling, then people can be better accountability partners for you too, which is good. Um, okay, so that helps by breaking it down. The next question is a big one, actually. It's the question of, am I worried about failure? And the answer is yes. You're probably worried about both failure and success. I find that when people are stuck in Goalnesia, they have like really big problems with the idea of great success. They scare themselves. I'm going to be so successful. I'm going to get burned out again, for example. And they have really big issues with failure, though they might not always, if they're a high achiever, they might not admit it to themselves, especially if they've read a lot of stuff about growth mindset. They're like, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm afraid of success. Okay. But you're also afraid of failure. Everyone is afraid of failure. Nobody wants to look stupid in front of other people. Nobody wants to discover that they can't do what they've always wanted to do. And that's the way we hold success generally, or failure is like, it's going to be this proof. It's going to be this thing. It's going to be this moment. Everyone's going to know. But actually, almost all failure, it doesn't play out that way. Failure is much more likely to be something like, I tried and I just hate what I did. Or I wrote something and it was awful. Or I asked for help and they said no. Or I, went to go try to understand my taxes and I just got confused and I was clicking around on the IRS website for 3 hours and then I needed a glass of wine. That's really what most failure looks like. And honestly, I have found in all my years of helping people do things they've never done before, because great work lives at the evolving edge. You're growing into your great work. You're doing something that feels scary and hard. So it's going to feel scary and hard. And the number one tip that I find helps to calm people down successfully is to say, just expect to do it badly. We sometimes refer to that as an MVP mindset, minimally viable product. It's like, I guess it's a software thing where it's basically like, let's just get this bubble gum and duct taped together so we can see if it works at all. Let's not make it pretty. Let's not work out all the bugs. Let's not worry about use cases outside on like the fringe. Let's just get it functioning so we can look at it for real. When you have that mindset, you're like, yeah, okay, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be perfect. It's not even, it might not even sort of resemble the final version of something, but it's up and I can have better thoughts about it. So sometimes when I'm working with people on sales, they'll be like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to go in there and I'm going to talk to them and they're going to say no. And it's very freeing when I'm like, yeah, probably 8 out of 10 people are going to say no. So we still got to do it because we need to get that number up. So if all you have to do is walk in and stutter through an awkward and awful conversation that I guarantee will not kill you, can you do it? If those are your expectations of what's going to happen when you walk in the door, are you willing to do it? And if they're not willing to do it, we got to talk about their why. Do you really want to build this business? Do you understand like the role that sales plays in having a business? Like there's other conversations to be had. But most people, by the time they're working with me and we're doing this work, they're like, yes, I can go stumble through an awkward conversation if you're really going to make me do it, which I am. So then they go do it. And shockingly, not to me, but to them, they're like selling things on these conversations. They're going in and the guy is buying it. Not always, but the conversations that we have start to change. Now it's like, well, he asked me this question. I didn't know the answer to that question. Okay, let's talk about that. That's a better conversation. That's out of Goalnesia and into the flow of your great work. Let's get in the river, right? Let's paddle around. Like, let's problem solve. Let's build this solution to that problem. You can't do that if you're so worried about failure that you're sitting around waiting to be ready and for everything to be perfect. Because they are never going to be ready. It's never going to be perfect. And you're not going to do it. And then your whole life is going to pass you by. And then you're going to be like, dang it, I really wanted to do that. So a whole lot of great work is saying, oh, well, I am never going to be ready. It's never going to be perfect, but I better get to it because it's going to take some time. There's going to be some problems. I'm going to work through them. There's going to be failure along the way, and that is okay. Now you've got the right mindset. Now you don't have a competing commitment. I can't do it unless it's perfect. That's not going to work. I'm going to do it even though it's imperfect. We've resolved the competing commitment, and now we can get busy doing it. So that's a really big one. The concept of being worried about failure. And then another really big one is this idea of our identity. So it's phrased on this worksheet as, am I worried about what others will think? Now, some people like me, like I'm kind of a lone wolf kind of person. Like I'm a good friend, I'm a good mom. Like I think I'm a good person in relationship with people. But in my heart of hearts, I'm kind of like, I'm that person who wants to go fast. And so I'm like, I'll just do it myself. I just do everything myself. But so I always resisted this idea that I cared what other people thought. And so in really kind of working my own way through this, I had to come to the realization that even the lone wolves among us, like we understand ourselves. All people do, not just lone wolves. We all do. It's just the rest of you don't stress about it the way that I did. We understand ourselves relative to others. So like everything we understand about ourselves, it's like, I'm funny. Can you be funny? Or can you really only be funnier than others and less funny than some? Right? Lots of human characteristics. I'm tall compared to who? I'm hardworking compared to who? I'm smart compared to who? So it's just built in, baked into the nature of human beings to understand ourselves relative to others. And so this concept, this particular mindset, which is sometimes held under the confusing category name of belonging. So it's like belonging in a group. But that group can also just be like belonging to myself. So sometimes we're genuinely worried about what other people will think. I have heard this said about people who are trying to lose weight. They sabotage their own success because they don't want their friends to think that they've changed. Or my friends are going to think I'm such a sellout because I've been working in nonprofits and now I have a business. Or my family isn't going to understand why I'm working so much when they think that I should be staying at home with my kids. Like it really is about other people. And sometimes it's about belonging to myself. Sales is the perfect example of this, where I, for example, think of myself as a very heart-centered helper type, right? Like I want to help you. I want to make sure that you're going to do your great work. Like when I have a client, like I am in it to win it for them. Like I will come to their stuff. I will show up for them. And so it was hard in the very beginning for me to charge for that because it felt so close to my heart. And so what I had to do was resolve that competing commitment because I felt like I was in like conflict with myself. How can I be a heart-centered helper type who sells herself as a product? How can that be? It just felt wrong. Salespeople are like smarmy, but I'm not smarmy. So I'd be like, I need to sell my services, but I don't want to be that person. I need to sell. I don't want to be that person. And around, I went like that for probably a year until I had what I would call like the worst hobby ever, which is like a very unprofitable business. In my first year, I made like $3,000 and I 100% spent $6,000 on the business. So it was like, that's like early business stuff. Like it's very common. It's okay. But I wasn't getting any better. So I needed to find someone to help me resolve this enormous competing commitment. I had to recognize that you can do sales in a heart-centered way, that it's actually the most compassionate thing you can do is to help somebody recognize that they need to invest in themselves. And I really grappled with it. And when I resolved it, I don't have any drama about sales anymore. I'm not going to do it that way. But I never had to do it that way in the first place because it was a subconscious competing commitment. I hadn't really examined it, hadn't really thought it through. I hadn't made my own choices about it. I was just running on like programming from the world. And I needed to resolve that programming so that I could do what I needed to do. Can't have a business if you won't sell yourself. So, over the course of many years in business, I'm now coming up on a decade of being a coach on my own. I've resolved that, and it makes it possible for me to like do what needs to be done in my business. It's no longer a competing commitment. I'm not at odds with my own identity anymore. So when we ask the question, am I worried about what others will think? Or the similar question, is it somehow in conflict with my identity to do this? Is often at the heart of your biggest struggle. Like, you say I really want to do this, but it like really, really bothers you that you want to do it when you start to do it. It's like something about it is just, "Argh." So what you have to do is figure out what that grunt is about and resolve it and make agreements with yourself. And then you will see that the goalnesia and the procrastination and all of that starts to melt away. So the last question is what is the question that comes into play once you've resolved a lot of these competing commitments, right? Like, you know, you want to do it. You're not going to screw yourself and end up burnout again. You know that you've got an idea of how to start and a system for staying small enough to be able to take steps. You've accepted that you're going to feel a lot of failure, and that's so you've made your peace with it. And you are no longer in conflict with your identity, and you've done whatever needs to be done about the other people in your life, right? You've either told them and let them handle their feelings about it, or you've decided you need to build a group of people who believe in you in this way so that you don't put the burden of this thing on those people who can't support you very well with it. You've done whatever needs to happen so that you have some kind of social support and you're not in conflict with your identity. Now, the regular old stuff that we actually started talking about, where it's like, I didn't write that check. You know, we need to have a system for remembering. A lot of people try to solve this whole problem with a time management system. I find it just ends up preoccupying people with learning a new system, and then they're right back with the same mindset problems, and the new system's no better than the old system. Any time management system will work for you, period. If it works for you, use it. If you haven't found something that works for you, you might consider the Great Work Method using the Great Work Journals because it's meant to help resolve the mindset issues that come along the way. So the way that this one in particular works is it asks you to name your vision and then set 90-day goals, but only 3 90-day goals. A stretch goal, a support goal, which is like a process goal, and a sanity goal, which is about resilience, because we're not doing great work at the expense of our health and happiness. We just don't do that. It's against the rules. Then it asks the question, now that we know our 3 goals, what are you going to do this week? But every time you set up a new week, you're required to go back and read your goals, because I know that goalnesia is nipping at your heels. Even if you set up those three goals, you're probably still like, hold on, what am I doing? So you got to go back and read it. It's fine, you're a busy person. It's fine that you forgot. Go back, read your goals, and then now ask yourself, okay, what does my week look like? What can I do? And then every day you're doing the same thing, setting 3 tasks, asking yourself what's going to get in your way. And that's where you might write, I'm really afraid they're going to tell me no, and then I'll have to cry all night. You got to be really honest with yourself in the Great Work Journal. If you're afraid you're going to cry all night, then face it and say, like, I might cry all night. That's okay. I can survive that too. I won't cry all night next time. I'll only cry for an hour. And then you see that you are not at the mercy of your feelings. You're going to get better over time. You're going to figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, you're going to ask for help. And if you ask for help, then I'm going to help you. So basically, like, once you're in the flow and you're asking yourself what's going to be hard here, you can talk yourself right into being okay with whatever's hard. That's a huge benefit. And the journal just walks you through how to do that. Um, but every day you have to go back and look at your weekly tasks. So every day you go back and look at your weekly tasks. But when you set up your week, you went back and looked at your goals. And when you were setting up your goals, you were checking in on your vision. So the purpose of it is always to stay aligned to your great work. It's very easy to veer off and get distracted and do a tangent, become confused, and that's okay. But now we have to have a way to get back on track. And the Great Work Journal helps you to do that. So once you've really resolved a lot of competing commitments, having this time management like methodology in hand can be really helpful. So we're going to put the link in the chat. If you want to grab the journal, please do. And I am going to check. I think I saw something come in on the chat, maybe not, but I'm going to like stop talking here to answer questions. But I would also encourage you to come to the next event. Oh, yay, Nada's using the journal. Come to the next event, snag the journal, hang out, and I'll answer any questions now. It's sort of an awkward ending, but I'm just going to stop talking. See if anybody has any questions. I'll take a drink of my water while I wait. So let me ask you this question. Does this all make sense to you? Was there an insight that you're like, I'm going to walk out of here and give this a shot, or I'm going to really journal about that question? What's the one insight that's like stuck in your craw? In a good way?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
What if what if the thing is a should? People are telling you and you know it's right. Um, you should do it. Like
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes you're making it sound like it's optional. I mean, like in school, nothing is optional, or in a business, it's not optional that I keep my receipts,
Sure it
together.
is, Jill. Billions of people don't know where any of their receipts are, and some people don't even file their taxes. What you're saying is there's a right way to do something, and I need to do it the
Yes.
right way.
So the right way, and
Yeah.
I'll go back to the groups and I got 3 people and then I didn't go through with it because I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I had no I did right. And I could do it again. I could do it tomorrow because now I know how,
Yeah.
you know. But there's a fine line between I want more money. And
Yeah.
I know that there were things to do to get that.
Yeah.
So not doing it isn't really very helpful to me. Just because I have the free choice to do what I want, or
Yeah.
if I don't really want it, I don't, I, like I don't have to put myself out in ways that I don't, that are a struggle, but I do. It's my business. I do have to struggle. It,
Yes.
do,
Well,
do
you
you,
have yes, you have to struggle. That's true.
right.
Well, I think it boils down to this, Jill. It's like you have to know yourself, and then you have to be willing to grapple with yourself and your own like thoughts and worries and feelings and stuff, right? So like, but it's not, some people want to give you an easy answer where it's like, it's all about discipline. If you say you're going to do it, then you do it, and that's it. And if you don't do it, then you suck and you're
Mhm.
never going to be successful. Well, that doesn't make any sense because we all know people who like don't follow through and they're very successful. So that can't be the truth. And there are also people who want to say, like, it's all about your joy. If it doesn't spark your joy, then you really shouldn't do it. Well, we know that's not true because honestly, the only thing that sparks my joy all the time is ice cream. And I can't only eat ice cream, right? Like, that's not allowed. So then there has to be a middle ground. There just has to be. And what I found is that the middle ground is actually the ground. All this nonsense trying to push you to the edges, like you're either like mentally tough or you're like, just loving the universe and the universe loves me. That's all just nonsense that distracts you from the actual work of doing it. So the question is, you want to make more money. That I would say is the non-negotiable aspect here. You want to make more money. You've always wanted to make more money, and I applaud you for that, right? So then it's a question of like, in this objective sense, what are the things that you could do to make more money? And then I would say pick one of those and figure it out. And now we've talked a lot about the groups, and maybe I'm the voice in your head saying, you should
Mhm.
start a group. You should start a group. But
You and many, many friends of mine,
yeah. And
you
so I
know,
would ask you to really ask yourself all six of these questions and then just decide. Is it just my voice and secretly you just don't want to? And really there's all these reasons why you don't want to? Then say you're not going to and it's fine. I will say, and then when somebody says you should start a group, we say, I considered that, but I might consider it again in 2026 and just put it in the parking lot and be done with it. But
or I could say maybe I do a little struggling and I
yes,
do it.
exactly. You can say, like, this is the struggle I'm choosing. I really
Yes.
do want to start a group. I'm
Yep.
totally convinced that this is a good idea, but
Mhm.
I'm just really, really scared. I'm
Okay.
scared of showing up on a Zoom and no one's there. I'm
Mhm.
scared of doing it and like losing all my individual clients. Name all the things that you're scared about, and then we will work them out. That is the ground. That's the fertile ground of great work. Let's get in there, do it in an awkward and uncomfortable way. And over time, we build a group that works for you, that doesn't cause you stress, or we discover, oh boy, that was bad. Not doing that again.
Right. I
That's
didn't
cool
make
too.
money, you
Wouldn't it be
know.
better to just know I tried groups
Yes.
and it really wasn't a good fit for me, as
Yes.
opposed to like 3 years of having it like out there? Maybe I'll start a group.
Yes.
Maybe it'll be good for me.
Yes.
That's really what I'm moving.
So when I kept thinking, it's not, business isn't, we're so liberal these days. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And that's not necessarily true in
No, it
my
isn't. It is
case.
not true.
It
I
is
mean,
not
you
true.
can not do anything you don't want to do, but you're probably not going to accomplish much. And maybe that's the choice you're making. And people can make their choices. By the way, Donna, I just want to say I really appreciate all your emojis. I'm really enjoying like all the emojis. So thank you for that.
I'm not seeing any from her.
Oh,
Oh,
you
do
might
they
not
come
have
and
it
go?
set to what's it called? Grid view or whatever, gallery.
Oh, I see. They come and go, maybe.
Thank you for sharing that, Jill, because I think it's a great example of what happens. An idea that is so good, but for some reason we just can't get to it. There's
Right.
always something happening. And if we can
And
identify it,
and the more you tell me like that I should and other people say should, and it's like, but I get to pick what I want to do, and that's not necessarily true.
it is true though.
Well, yeah, right.
I think you have to take responsibility for the choice. And I'm not telling you you're not taking responsibility, but there's a certain amount of like taking responsibility for the choice and responsibility for the failure and responsibility for the success.
Mhm.
We have to make choices with incomplete information. It might or might not be a good idea to start a group. But if you want to give it a shot, like let's find out by doing it,
Right.
not by sitting around waiting for it to be like the perfect guaranteed solution,
Yeah,
because it just
yeah.
doesn't work like that.
And if that's one way to make more money, it deserves a try.
Mhm. Yes, it
Yeah.
deserves a try. Hi, Donna. Let's hear it.
Hey, I'll come
Hi.
on for a little bit. I
Okay.
distract myself when I see myself, so
Oh,
so
Join the crowd.
I thought maybe Jill would get something from this. The take responsibility for the choice. That is part of the demoralization that you mentioned earlier. Um, the procrastination, demoralization, abandoning the project. Seems like every time I get started, something big happens. For example, I was on track, trying to be on track. I've had some huge health issues, decades long,
Mhm.
but especially the last 8 years have been horrible. Um, get going, and then my mom had a stroke.
Yeah.
And then, so, and I wasn't even actually driving at the time. And then I have to drive 3 hours and go help her, live at her house half the time, take
Yeah.
her through 4 or 5 ER, assisted living. She's a full-time nurse. And I hated it and I kept wanting to back out, but there was no one else that can do it. I have a horrible sibling. Um, and I had to make a choice. Could I live with not giving up half a year?
Mm.
No, but it was more than a full-time job.
Hmm.
So to take responsibility and feel good about it, she's paying everybody else. I paid myself for the time. And that way I could do it and not be resentful and
Mm.
complaining because I was putting in 80 hours for several months.
Wow.
And being injured too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, uh, so anyway, that was the choice I had to take responsibility for. I can't, even though a relationship can be fraught and had to, work with that. That made the difference, and I had to change the circumstances so that I felt good about what I was doing, not just morally, but
Yeah.
also as a person in that way, since I wasn't making money, Jill, because I've been injured so long, to shore up the accounts because I'm going through that money very quickly that she has to pay for full skilled nursing.
Hmm.
And then I have some money that I paid myself from her. It won't be a
Hmm.
lot, but it might could buy her, an extra time in the facility should something happen.
Right.
Anyway, all that, Jill, I related a lot to what you said. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'll
Thank you
cut
for
back
sharing
off.
that, Donna.
And
Thank
Donna,
you.
I've been a caregiver also
Yeah.
for I mean not professionally, managing everything for over 7 years until my mom died. And Amanda
Mm.
knows it was like
It's a
I
lot.
started working with a man. I mean, I was getting calls from the aide saying we ordered ice cream and it was melting. And it came melted. I was like, oh my God, I'm working, leave me alone. I
Yeah.
was,
Yeah, but
and
it's crazy, and it's crazy because it almost always falls to the women, and they just have to have somebody. And I'm like, I live 3 hours away. Well, move her closer to you. That's not an option. She won't go. I mean, it is. I
Yeah.
could force it, but
yeah.
I'm like, you just have to. And I had already been through fatal cancer. She just happened to survive hers 8 years ago. So I'd already
Wow.
done a year and a half
That,
before.
that.
Wow.
Serious and still, injured at that time too. So I had already done this, and but
Yeah.
we can do this. And Jill, yours especially, people like me probably need that. Not to add anything, but just saying, I get you. And there is people that could probably benefit, but you know that because you've lived it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Donna. I really
Thank you,
appreciate it
Donna.
because, like, it can all feel very theoretical. And then it's like, but my actual real life is very restricted. And sometimes our life is like, it really is kind of like you can do very little. But I
Right.
would still say doing even that little bit can make you feel so much better and make it so that if when time does open up, because nothing lasts forever, you're ready, you're sort of prepared. And that's really great too.
And
And
I do have your
Julie,
book, Amanda. So now I have
yay,
gone back to, well, you can't see it, but I have
yeah,
gone back to a time management system that had worked before I got injured the second surgery
good,
time. And I'm making progress, and your method has just cleared up a few little kinks in my thinking about it.
good.
So, this information you gave out today was invaluable to help me put to place. But GPT seriously is letting me finally, it's going to do it. I'm going to publish a book or get a contract this year.
Yeah, you
Finally,
are, girl.
40 years since I started writing, 35 since I had a novella for my
Good for
bachelor's
you.
degree.
Well, you know what, Donna? I hope that you come back next week,
I
or not
plan
next
on it,
week, next month, all of you. Um,
hopefully.
there's links if you save the chat.